Imagine a high-stakes financial thriller, but instead of a bank vault, it's all playing out in the halls of power in Brussels. This is the incredible story of a $90 billion gamble the European Union took to keep Ukraine from collapsing. So, let's get into what really went down.
All right, so picture this. It's December 2025. The war is just grinding on, it's brutal, and Ukraine is on the verge of financial ruin. The IMF comes out with this terrifying warning. If Ukraine doesn't get a massive pile of cash and fast, the entire state will go bankrupt by spring. And if that happens, its military could just completely collapse.
And then Poland's Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, just lays it all out there with this chilling line. And what he meant was brutally simple. He was saying, look, if Ukraine's economy goes down, its army is next. And that means the front line of a hot war is suddenly right on NATO's doorstep. The stakes could not have been higher.
Now, in the end, they did hammer out a deal. A mind-boggling $90 billion loan. But honestly, that's not even the most interesting part of this story. The real drama, the part that's like something out of a movie, is the brilliant, super high-risk plan that they almost went with. A plan that completely fell apart in the final hours.
So, to really get why they were even thinking about these wild plans, you got to understand the sheer scale of the crisis they were facing. We're talking about a financial time bomb, and the clock was ticking loudly.
Okay, here's the number that was keeping everyone up at night, straight from the IMF. Ukraine needed 137 billion euros just for 2026 and 2027. And listen, this wasn't for fancy new weapons or anything like that. This was just to keep the lights on, to pay soldiers, doctors, teachers, basically to stop the entire country from just failing.
And this chart, man, it just puts the whole problem in a nutshell. On the left, you've got Ukraine's massive need. And that tiny little bar right next to it, that's what was left of the U.S. contribution. A huge, gaping hole had just opened up, leaving this giant question mark hanging right over Europe.
All right, so this is the key. This whole emergency was kicked off by a political earthquake in Washington. There's a new administration, and direct U.S. aid just craters. It drops by over 95%. All of a sudden, Europe wasn't just chipping in anymore. They were the only ones left holding the bag.
Which brings us to their first idea, and you should think of this less like a boring financial proposal and more like a really sophisticated, high-tech heist.
Okay, so the idea was called the Reparations Loan, and it was kind of genius. See, the EU happens to be sitting on about 210 billion euros of frozen Russian money. So Plan A was to use that cash as collateral for Ukraine's loan. The beauty of it? The aggressor pays for everything, and it doesn't cost EU taxpayers a single cent. Perfect, right? So this is the choice they were staring at, laid out side by side. On one side, you've got the heist. It's free for taxpayers, which is great, but it comes with huge legal and financial risks. On the other side, you've got the IOU. It's legally safe, but the bill lands squarely on the EU budget and its taxpayers.
So, if the plan was so great, this taxpayer-free heist, why'd it fall apart? Well, it all comes down to one country. And a parachute. I mean, on paper, it sounds like a no-brainer, doesn't it? So what happened? Well, it turns out that when you start messing with the fundamental plumbing of global finance, the devil is absolutely in the details.
And this quote from the Belgian Prime Minister, Bart de Wever, just says it all. You see, most of that frozen Russian money, it's sitting in this one institution in Brussels called Euroclear. Think of it like a central clearinghouse for a huge chunk of the world's money. So what de Wever was saying was, look, we're willing to jump, but you're all coming with us. We are not taking this fall alone.
And Belgium was terrified of two very real things. First, Euroclear is a critical piece of the world's financial plumbing. If Russia suited into bankruptcy, it could trigger a global meltdown like a 2008-style crisis. And second, things were getting personal. Russian intelligence was reportedly intimidating Euroclear executives, and Moscow had made direct threats against the Prime Minister himself. But the real killer blow? It came from the markets themselves. The ratings agency Fitch put Euroclear on what's called a rating watch negative, which is basically them screaming, this is a terrible idea and it could break the whole system. Just like that, the perfect plan was officially toxic.
Okay, so Plan A, the big heist, is dead in the water. So leaders are scrambling for their getaway car, which turned out to be Plan B, way safer, but way more expensive. Plan B was a lot more straightforward. The EU would just borrow the $90 billion on the open markets and then hand it over to Ukraine as an interest-free loan. The catch?
Well, somebody has to pay the interest on that loan, right? And that somebody is the EU taxpayers. For decades.
But wait, there's always one more problem, isn't there? See, any deal involving the EU budget needs everyone to agree. Unanimous consent. And you had Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who has a long history of blocking this exact kind of thing. So how on earth did they get him on board?
Well, they cut a deal. A pretty clever one, actually. Orban agrees not to veto it, and in exchange, Hungary, along with Slovakia and the Czech Republic, get a complete pass. They don't have to contribute a dime, and they have zero liability. Nothing. It let Orban claim a win back home, and it let the crucial loan finally go through.
So the deal is done, money is flowing, crisis averted, right? Well, not so fast. Because even though the EU took the safe route, Russia was already cooking up its financial revenge.
$230 billion. That's the size of the lawsuit Russia's central bank has now filed against Euroclear in a Moscow court. It's a legal counterattack designed to be almost exactly the value of their frozen assets. They're basically pointing a legal bazooka right at the heart of Belgium's financial system.
But then there's this, which is even sneakier. Russia created a new decree that sets a trap for any Western companies still doing business there. It lets the Kremlin just seize their assets and sell them off in 10 days, through a bank that's under sanctions. So the Western company can't do anything to stop it without breaking sanctions back home. It's a perfect legal trap. A catch-22.
So where does all this leave us? Look, the EU pulled off something huge. That $90 billion loan was a pragmatic win that bought Ukraine precious time, at least 2 more years of survival. But now you see Russia fighting back, not just with tanks, but with lawsuits and legal traps. And it just makes you wonder, did Europe really solve a crisis, or did they just kick a much bigger can down the road?